Welcome to Viewpoints. I'm Heather Isvaran, and with me today is Anthony Vassalo, Chairman for the National Intelligence Management Council. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you for having me here.
So tell us about the mission.
The mission of the National Intelligence Management Council to support the Director of National Intelligence by leading IC mission management to achieve unity of effort and effect. We do that through several ways across an arc of activity that extends from the very short-term and tactical support to policymakers, up through support to warfighters, and at the high end in deconflicting and trying to prioritize large-scale mission and strategy issues for the budget. So we do that through the 17 national intelligence managers. They cover a range of topics and activities to coordinate their community of interest that are regional and functional. So there are national intelligence managers for the Western Hemisphere and the homeland. There's National Intelligence Manager for East Asia. There's National Intelligence Manager for functional issues like threat finance or cyber. So the 17 of them come together and coordinate the activities of the 16 intelligence agencies with respect to their particular areas of influence. And that can range, a day for them can be supporting policymakers in the morning on some issue specific to a North Korean activity, and in the afternoon they're working on large-scale issues that have to do with the budget 3 to 4 years out, or what are the capabilities you're looking for in a satellite, which may be 10 or 15 years out. So that's largely how they coordinate the community, and that's the mission of the council, is to bring them all together. And both to support them as they look down within their communities and do those activities, but also to look for areas where they do need to be prioritized, where they need to speak with one voice on larger issues in terms of areas where we might want to accept risk or how to prioritize across the activities.
And so when we're talking about the council, who makes up the council?
So there are 17 national intelligence managers. They come from, some are ODNI staff cadre. I'm an ODNI cadre officer. But the majority are in joint duty, so they come from the agencies themselves. They come from the intelligence community. And while each national intelligence manager is an expert in his particular or her particular field, we also try to look for a balance across the agency. So when you want someone from the Central Intelligence Agency, you want someone from NGA, you want someone from DIA, so that we have that reach back and you get that perspective from the different intelligence agencies and across the community. My deputy is as a deputy assistant director at the FBI. So we really strive for that. But they come in and from the community.
And they are engaged for amounts of time, or?
Yeah, typically it's the joint duty rotations are 2 to 3 years. And then some of the national intelligence managers can be there a little bit longer depending on the topic. There's no hard and fast rule, but generally if someone's coming in off a joint duty assignment, those tend to be 2 to 3 year assignments.
It sounds like it has a huge portfolio of interest. You're talking everything from strategy to risk and just whatever's going on in a day. So
yeah, it makes for an interesting day.
It does. It's probably never the same day twice. But
no, not for them, not for me. So yeah, it's interesting.
What do you do exactly to support all of that structure?
So we have a couple of different roles as a council staff. So the council was stood up a couple of years ago. The NIMS have been around for about 6 or 7 years. I'm the second chair of the National Intelligence Management Council, and it was set up for a couple of reasons. One was that the NIMS have very specific places within all the ODNI staff processes. They tend to be the touch point for mission, for the voice of mission. But what was happening both for the ODNI staff and for the agencies was that you had 17 voices essentially asking for more and for advocating for their communities. But there was no way to prioritize across those 17 voices to get them to have those discussions about how much is enough or what is a priority between different portfolios when it came to budgeting issues or sorting out ISR or doing those sorts of things. So the council was stood up partly to do care and feeding, and we do that. So we have all of the normal sort of headquarters commandant type support that you would expect for all the NIMS and the NIM teams. And then we also have responsibility for sorting out cross-NIM issues, coordinating responses. So you can imagine if you have a request from the National Security Council that they want to surge ISR to a particular place, then that has to come from somewhere. And so what you would like to see is for those NIMs to come together that are affected and look at what the cost and benefit is, ways that they can mitigate, and be able to provide the NSC staff, and senior policymakers and warfighters, not just well, here's what you can take, but here's the balance of what that will do to other things that you care about. And here's how we can mitigate it, and maybe here's how we can't mitigate it, and then are you willing to buy this risk? So we sort out those sorts of issues across the NIMC staff. We do the large-scale coordination of policies that would affect the budget and things like that, where you really do need the NIMs to speak with one voice on prioritization as it applies to the budget, the acquisition, and the resourcing processes.
One of the many products, I'm sure there are many, that you put out is that Global Trends product. And I wanted to talk about that in terms of, our audience is made up of local, state, and federal Homeland Security practitioners and academics. So could you talk about that Global Trends product?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So within the sort of the mission side of the OD&I staff, intelligence integration is sort of the largest part, the Director of Intelligence Integration. So the National Intelligence Management Council is part of that. The National Intelligence Council is part of that. The President's Daily Brief staff is part of that. And the Global Trends is actually put out by the National Intelligence Council, which is our sister organization. Now, we used it for putting together the integrated mission strategy that the NIMS built to try to provide one voice to guide the budget and within the IC. And so they did a great job this year. If anybody has a chance, an unclassified briefing, you can go find it online. It's produced by the Strategic Futures Group at the NIC. They do it every 4 years. What they did this year that I thought was particularly interesting and useful for us, and might be interesting and useful to your audience, rather than just look out 25 or 30 years, they start at the 5-year point, and they start to look at what the trends are from 5 years out, and it's called the paradox of progress. So they talk about how a number of the trends that we see in our lives and in the international environment, whether it's the super empowerment of individual actors or non-governmental actors, not state actors, or whether it's changes to the strategic environment caused by Russia or China becoming rising powers and trying to, or in the case of Russia, perhaps a declining power, but trying to change the balance of the world system. Different types of terrorism, different ideological issues around nationalism. So they look at all of that, changes to technology as well, and then they say, from that, here's where we see the world going. And they hypothesize a number of different futures that we were able to take then and say, how should the intelligence community posture itself to be able to support policymakers and warfighters 5 years out, 10 years out, which is what we're really trying to affect when you talk about budget processes. So it's a great document. They did a wonderful job, and it's something that I would highly recommend looking at.
So you were able to talk to a few of our students today, and I just wondered what you thought Homeland Security practitioners and academics should know about the great work you all are doing out there.
Yeah, well, there's a number of national intelligence managers that touch on the sort of work that it's done within the Homeland. First, on the OD&I staff, partner engagement, Russ Porter runs a program, right? Russ, and has for years, that helps to bring together state and locals with the larger work that the intelligence community is doing. I think Russ does a great job. So that's the first place that I would think about. There's a NIM for the Western Hemisphere and the Homeland, and that's obviously a place. Now, he has a very particular portfolio because the Homeland is a crowded place with lots of authorities and missions and people working them. So he works with DHS and with Justice primarily on continuity of government, on increasingly on transnational criminal organizations, and support the IC can provide for that. And on protection of critical infrastructure. So those are his homeland focuses. He also has responsibility for all of Latin America and the Caribbean, so he's got a lot on his plate. You also have some of the centers that obviously do that work that are also national intelligence managers. So the National Counterterrorism Center, the National Counterproliferation Center, the National Counterintelligence Center, those all also have a plug-in, I think, for people who are working homeland issues. The National Intelligence Manager for Cyber and the Cyber Threat Intelligence Integration Center are also run out of our shop. And those are also places, I think, where there's a plug-in on those particular issues. But I would say the first stop is Russ.
Yes.
And then the NIM for Western Hemisphere and the homeland.
Excellent. And what do you see the challenges for, the next 5 years, would you say? Give me a top three.
A top three, that's tough.
Let's talk strategy, because that's what we do here, is strategy and policy.
So what we try to produce, or we did produce, but for the first time, was an integrated mission strategy. And I talked about it a little bit within the context of how we were able to take the Paradox of Progress document that the NIC produced and then turn that into guidance for the intelligence community for the budget process. So that was a strategy document, and we looked at that and we said, from this future, here are the priorities that we should have. We asked the national intelligence managers to come together and say, what are your top 3 to 5 issues that would require some sort of a posture change 3 to 5 years out, something that doesn't necessarily have to be something you would affect with the budget. And we found that a lot of the top issues actually you could fix with policy changes, or there was some sort of a governance model or something that you could change. It's relatively easy. It doesn't cost millions of dollars to address that problem and try to close that gap. So the overarching sort of thought is that it is an incredibly complex environment. It's a more complex environment. We expect budgets to be flat or moving down, which creates the imperative that the intelligence community work together more and smarter to provide policymakers and warfighters with the support you would expect, or that they would expect. So for us, it's really looking at that environment that the NIC portrayed, one where you do have actors like Russia and China that are trying to change the dynamic, where you have regional actors who are empowered in ways that they may not be comfortable in terms of what we would consider normal deterrence models, with the capabilities that they have acquired, and what that might mean in terms of a confrontation with the United States or with our allies. So those are also things that you put into the mix. There's technologies that are becoming available to non-state actors and even to individuals that could have an effect outside of the scope of anything we've seen for those types of actors on the historical stage before. So all of that are things that we tried to get at in terms of shaping what the intelligence community would need to do to posture itself, so that 7-8 years from now, we would be able to continue to provide the great support that we do to policymakers and warfighters. I think it's that aspect. It's the complexity of the environment. I know. So the former director of the DNI, Director Clapper, would say that in his 55 years in the intelligence community, this was the most complex environment he had seen. And I think that's true. And it's complex in ways that we don't fully understand. It's complex in ways that are changing as we try to address them, both in terms of technology, in terms of ideology. The rise of nationalism and some of those forms that we've seen in the West is concerning. Terrorism continues to morph. So all of those things do yield an incredibly complex environment, and when you throw over that the fact that it's complex in ways that we're not used to dealing with, and that we do expect eventually to see flat or declining budgets, it's something that just provides a tremendous number of challenges.
So do you have any recommendations for how interagency cooperation can do better?
You have to get people to buy in. They have to buy into the vision. They have to buy into the amount of work they're going to have to put into it, and they have to believe that the end product is going to make a difference. That there is a real reason to do this beyond some sort of headquarters element decided that it was a good idea. So there has to be that very clear what's in it for them, and I don't mean that in a selfish way. It's just they're applying resources to it. They're going to They're going to do work. And so at the end of the day, that nobody wants to do that if it's going to be some sort of paper drill, or if you're working, on some sort of activity that's for somebody else's ego.
Right.
They want to know that there's a purpose, that there's a reason, that there's something where the intelligence community is going to come out on the other side significantly better. And if it is, if you can show that, what I've found, going back to when I, first got out of the Army in 2008 and started working at NCTC, the Counterterrorism Center on these types of issues, is that people are happy to come along. People are happy to play. People are happy to contribute the resources that it takes to achieve that vision. They just have to believe in it, and so it's part of your job is to do that, to get people focused on what are the higher values, to make sure people have a voice, and there's a balance there. You can't let it become sort of lowest common denominator.
Right.
You can't let people get bogged down in sort of authorities issues. So I think that's what's important. I mean, there's sometimes you have to be the quarterback in an interagency process. Sometimes you have to be a point guard. I think as a member of the OD&I staff, you probably don't want to be in a position where too often you're trying to take credit for yourself. I mean, you get everybody involved in those things. But it really is something, I think, and this goes beyond the intelligence community. I think this is true of interagency coordination in general. I mean, if you can show those things, that you're adding value, and you can get people to buy into the vision, then they will help you achieve it.
Anthony, thank you so much for your time today. We really learned a lot.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was wonderful.